Hey guys, here we are for chapter 20. We're going to talk about water pollution specifically. Now chapter 20.1, we're going to talk about water pollution causes and effects. But as the case with every chapter, we're going to kick off with a case study. Now the case study here is the Gulf of Mexico's annual dead zone. No, it's not a new Stephen King novel. It's just what happens every year. Spring and summer tend to bring huge inputs of nutrients from the Mississippi River Basin. Now, I'm going to put the picture up there so you can see it. And remember, the Mississippi River Basin, it covers almost 2/3 of the United States, ultimately. Basically from the Rocky Mountains east and the Appalachian Mountains west, all of the water, the rain, dumps into the Mississippi River. So this is going to be rains, and as my dad would say, April showers bring May flowers. We tend to get more rain, and also we get the snow melt up above the mountains. So the spring, all this stuff melts down, rains come and wash all these nutrients into the Mississippi, which dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. So this explosive growth of phytoplankton, then they eventually die and get consumed by the bacteria, and this depletes the oxygen levels, specifically in the Gulf's bottom layer. What happens? All the nutrients come in, the phytoplankton grow like crazy, the algae grow like crazy, even cyanobacteria, blue-green, but they're photosynthesizing, and then they die and they drift down to the bottom. When they drift down to the bottom, then hordes of oxygen-consuming bacteria come in to eat and consume them. And this whole bottom layer winds up getting oxygen deficient and nothing can live there. Hence the term a dead zone. Very little marine life exists there. And as you can see down in that lower portion, as it dumps in, this whole area around Louisiana and into Texas, and even some up into Mississippi, winds up getting these huge dead zones. The greater the rainfall, the bigger the dead zone tends to be. So in years that we have heavy rains, we tend to get a larger dead zone. And it's a huge issue for everybody who is trying to get shellfish, shrimp, anything out in that area, because these areas just die off and nothing is there. And even the faster moving fish that can get away from these oxygen deprived zones don't go there, right? Since there's not the oxygen, there's no food, and they leave and are gone. Now the winter storms tend to come in and redistribute the oxygen. All of this nutrients, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, ceases, and the winter storms tend to stir the water back up and it goes back to normal. This is just an annual event, and we can track it directly back to cultural eutrophication, too many nutrients. Now we talk about water pollution, its causes and effects. Now water pollution, remember, water pollution is anything that causes illness and possibly death in anything that depends on the water supply, either something living in it or like humans needing to drink it. Primary sources of water pollution are going to be agricultural activities, farming if you will, but once again, remember that's going to include raising animals, then industrial facilities, industry creating waste, and mining. These are kind of our big three when it comes to polluting our water sources. So we have point source and non-point source. Remember, I like to remember it by point source. You did it. We can say, where did it go? I don't know. It's out there, but it's hard to tell exactly. Point source solutions. The discharge of the pollutants are coming from a very specific location. We know it is this farm. We know it is that factory. We know it is that sewage treatment plant, whatever the case may be. We know it is that oil tanker. It's got a leak in it. We can see the oil. Point source. Also, we have the animal feedlots. These CAFOs, where everything, concentrated animal feedlots, right? All these animals are jammed into one area. It produces a lot of waste. And sometimes these wastes get stored in areas, well, if they break open, etc. This basic sewage leaks into and gets into the water. But these are the big ones, if you will. Non-point source pollution. A lot of times I say non-point, that, we point our finger, but there's, 3 of them pointing back at us. Point sources, you and me. It can be golf courses, it can be small farm, this or that, but it's just, we know it's coming from these areas, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly where or who the problem may be, and a lot of times it's just too many people to identify regularly. Very broad and diffuse. This whole region or area is contributing all small amounts. Rainfall or snow melt. Once again, pollutants are collecting in the snow, right? Whether it's acid snow or pollutants up in the air and the snow comes down, it lands on the mountains. And it's all sitting there and then it melts all at once. Well, maybe not all at once, but a lot melts at one time. Now, all those pollutants which were stored up in the mountains in snow get released very quickly into the water. Non-point. It came from cars driving, it came from factories, what have you. Also, the runoff of fertilizers and pesticides. Now, this could be you and me. We're fertilizing our lawn, fertilizing our gardens. Can be croplands, can be forests, whether we're logging out a forest and all that stuff then washes off. We don't have the vegetation. Golf courses, you name it. It's just sort of, when we live in cities and towns, we tend to wind up having a lot of non-point source pollution. Leading causes of it, as we talked about, agricultural. Well, if you look at the picture back here, this is just sediment erosion. The sediments are eroding off the lands. We've cut down the trees, or it's farming. We've cleared the land, and you see where that, all around that river, stream, that's just sediment built up. And this can pollute the water. Once again, anything that degrades the water. It can be simple as excess dirt pouring into it, because not everything can survive in very turbid waters. Fertilizers, pesticides are sort of the biggies, if you will, because they run off, get into the water supplies, and they either cause things to grow too much or they kill them. If it's fertilizers causing the algae to grow, if it's pesticides, it's causing the organisms to get killed, but not the algae typically. And then we have just bacteria from the livestock, poop, if you will, right? Any kind of waste. Could be animal waste, can be human waste. Here in the United States, most of our human waste gets treated, but in a lot of the world, it doesn't. So we talk about human waste, and a lot of times we just mean people peeing and pooping in the streets or in the woods or wherever it makes it into the water supply. But agricultural activities right here, we're referring to primarily animals. Now, industrial facilities. Here we see an area where we have a drain pipe coming out, and we can see that water is polluted, right? It's not healthy for anything trying to live in it, drink it, or use it. So industrial facilities, they may be dumping directly in, they may have a leak or a problem, and it's contributing. Lots of ways that industry can. We also have mining. Picture you see here, yeah, that orange water, it's not supposed to be orange. That is acid leak from an open coal pit mine. So in a pit mine, when they're storing it, and the acid leaked out and into the water and killed off everything there, damaged it, and until that can all gets washed out, it's just a serious problem. And then we just have this untreated human wastewater, like back here. In this case, a lot of that's just some plastic human waste, right? We're throwing it out. We're throwing it out the window. We're picturing it on the street. It's going in the landfill, but then it rains and some of it comes out, blows out, what have you. Just this untreated human wastewater. Can be pee and poop, and like from here, it can simply be trash in there, but it's coming from human use. Once again, we can go to HIPCO at any point in time to talk about some of these things. Now, harmful effects of water pollutants. So what does it do? So it's polluted. Oh, what's the big deal? What does it really do? Well, the most serious threats to stream and lake water quality, the most serious out there, mercury. Mercury builds up in our system. Mercury is used in a lot of industrial, mining industry, etc. uses mercury, and any little bit it leaks out gets into the water. Also, it's a naturally occurring element. So when we get erosion, some can just wash out of the rocks and get into the system as well. But every time you get a little bit of mercury, it stores in your fatty tissues. It doesn't wash out. Vitamin C is water soluble. But mercury is fat soluble. It gets stored in your fat cells and it builds up over time. So one of the most serious is mercury. Then we get pathogens. Now, pathogen, we mean something that's going to make you get sick. Bacteria, giardia, once again, any of these kind of little wee beasties, if you will, a pathogen, something in the water that makes you sick. And once again, this can be bacteria, but broken sewer lines cause a lot of this, or a leak in the sewer lines. And human waste, again, can be animal waste, the bacteria that can make us get sick, like E. coli, leak into the water, and you get too high counts of it. Once again, we just have sediment from land disturbance, land disturbance, agriculture, disturbing the land, cutting all the trees down, and we get erosion. Metals, heavy metals making it in the water, lead being one of the biggies, but it's not the only one that causes problem. And then just eutrophication. Too many nutrients get in and cause oxygen depletion, not enough oxygen, things can't survive in the water. So then we talk about this infectious disease organisms and contaminated drinking water. An estimated 1.6 million people die every year from water contamination. Simply it. They're drinking water that's making them sick. It's got disease in it, pathogens of some kind of an infectious disease. This can be things like hepatitis, this can be cholera, it can be giardia, all kinds of things, but people are drinking unhealthy water. Now the chart I'm going to throw behind me, I'm not going to go through this hook, line, and sinker, if you will, or read every aspect there. But this is a really good one to study, to look at, pull it up in the book, and make good note of it. We have the type or the effect, like infection agents, something that causes disease. Then it gives an example of what that would be, whether it's a bacteria, a virus, protozoa, single-celled organisms like amoebic dysentery. You can get bacillic dysentery, amoebic dysentery. Had them both. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of these from bad water in areas where I lived. The water wasn't clean all the time. Most specifically Nepal, but also in India and to a lesser degree Thailand. We all wound up getting sicknesses from water that wasn't actually clean. And then some of the major sources of those, human and animal waste. And we just go through the different ones. Oxygen demanding waste, biodegradable materials, plant nutrients, eutrophication, if you will, organic chemicals. This would be like oil, which again, organics, right? Fossil fuels, any of these things that get into the water supply, gasoline, oil, pesticides, etc., cause a lot of problems with that. Inorganic chemicals, acids, bases, heavy salts, metals, like we talked about, lead, if you will. Once again, just sediments. Too much dirt getting into the system causes problems. It also tends to bring nutrients and metals with it as well. Once again, it's erosion, the rock cycle, right? Carrying everything that's in there. Then we get our heavy metals that come in, lead, mercury, arsenic in this, as well as just thermal pollution. If the water gets too warm, not everything can survive in warmer water. We don't think of it as a problem, but it can be. Now, the science focus in this chapter is testing water for pollutants. How do we know? We want to find out. Well, a few different things we look for. Number one, infectious agents. Now, if we get a half a cup of water, about 100 milliliters or so of water, it should have 0 colonies of coliform bacteria. However, in a lot of places we test it, we wind up getting a lot of coliform bacteria. This tends to come from waste, animal or human, whether it's sewage of some shape, form, or fashion, making its way into the water, and people get sick. Bacillic dysentery is a huge one from that, but not the only one. We also test for dissolved oxygen. 3 parts per million or less is fatal to most fish species. Now, what's good? 8 to 9 is considered good. There are areas where you have it higher. If you're up in the source mountain stream, maybe up in the 10 to 12, but 8 to 9 is considered good. It gets down to 3 parts per million. Most things can't survive that. That's one of the things we test. Just a chemical analysis. We'll get a sample of water, test it for any chemicals that might be in it, which could cause problems. We also use indicator species. We can check things like oysters or amphibians. If their numbers are going down, well, they're the ones that tend to get sick or decrease first. We realize we may well have a problem. We can weigh the amount of sediment. We can take a sampling of water, see how much sediment is in it, and it gives us an idea of the health of that water system, especially if we have a control. We know what it's supposed to be. If it goes up or down, we get a measure of what's happening to the stream. And we also have some color meters, like color meter. We can look at the water through like a spectrogram, and we get an idea of what's in the water based on the colors that reflect and give off. These are just some of the ways that we can test and check our water for contaminants. Well, guys, that wraps us up for section 1. Come back next time and we'll talk specifically about stream and lake pollution.